Friends.
Texas Tech has been one of the great stories in college basketball throughout the year. A lot of it because of the coaching change. Mark Adams, Chris Beard leaves, and then they were always, it seemed like, center stage with those games in Lubbock and Austin, and then they're just really good. And then beaten by Kansas in the Big 12 championship game, and now they're in the Sweet 16, and a lot of people expected him to be there. Last night was a street fight, but that's a lot of times how they win and how they play, and that's a compliment. Carlos Silva from the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal joins us. Carlos, they found a way. That's all that matters right now. Win in advance, right?
Absolutely, and Mark Adams is very complimentary to his defense. And the other thing, too, that I think people forget is, yes, their identity is defense, but I think the other thing, too, that they like to crash the boards. And you look at the 10-1 run that they used to close it out, the first two points or buckets, if you will, those free throws by Adonis Arms and Kevin O'Banner, they started because those guys just wanted to get the rebound more on the offensive side. And then from there, you got the defense, that identity that Texas Tech does have with Marcus Silva making a huge block on one end and then making free throws with his right hand. He's a left-handed shooter, but he felt like he had a hitch in his left-handed free throw. So literally about a month ago, he just started to work on it, and looks like it paid off huge for him, and not only that, for Mark Adams and company.
Do you think that this team can continue to win that ugly?
I mean, it's going to be tough when you've got teams that are consistent, and Mark kind of mentioned that when we mentioned having that game against Duke. But, I mean, you look at it, it's been what Texas Tech has been able to do. You have good offensive games, and the defense is there. It's a little bit more of a wider scoring margin, but sometimes you get those ones where you have those 9.5-minute scoring droughts, like at Oklahoma State and Stillwater, and you're not able to score a point in 9.5 minutes, and you lose that one. So I think that's the biggest thing for Mark, is just trying to figure out a way to not go on those really, really long scoring droughts. And the way that they do that is what they did during that 10-1 run is rebound well, keep your guy in front of you. And then if you're able to, put your hands in some passing lanes, create deflections, just like Kevin McCullough did, and he put the cap on that nice little run with the big two-handed dunk later on in that contest.
How big of a deal is this to be back in the Sweet 16, but to do it in Mark Adams' first year?
It's funny. I keep getting asked the question, are you surprised about it? I think there's a different word, and I can't think about it, but the way I can kind of phrase it is, you have to remember, Mark Adams has been a part of this success the last 5 years. He was the lead assistant coach for Chris Beard. So he's been in on these recruiting visits for a Tariq and for Matt Mooney, or some of the other guys that have been huge contributors for Texas Tech. So it's not like he doesn't know how to do all this stuff. I think people are finally starting to realize, okay, this guy does have the X's and O's. He knows how to play or coach, should I say, good defense. He gets his guys in position. And I think the one thing that is surprising, and I'll even admit this myself, is they are huge on the recruiting route in terms of not necessarily finding those 5-star talents, those guys that are going to go to the NBA in the first round or something like that. They're looking for guys that fit to their system that they need. They need long, athletic, tall guys that can create havoc in the passing lanes. And you see that with Adonis Arms and Breezy Warren, Shannon McCullough came back, Terry Shannon came back, and a Clarence Madoni, who not necessarily in that frame of over 6'6", but he's just a menace on the defensive end. And I think that's something to credit all those coaches that he was able to bring in, because at one point, right last April, so to speak, it was him and Sean Sutton, and from there he's able to create what he's done so far. So I think that's the surprising part, is when it was just Mark Adams and Sean Sutton and just trying to figure out what you want out of your program. Obviously, they want to win, and they found a way to win, and not only that, but win at a high level, and they have a chance to go even further, and potentially where one other team has gone before, and that's 2019, and that's a championship game.
What was the stat, Carlos? And I don't want to make a mistake on this, but was it that Texas Tech missed 10 consecutive shots and gained ground on Notre Dame? Is that what happened?
That's possible. I'm not sure on that one, but I think that the thing to look at, again, I know they don't keep these stats, but just look at the deflections that are created, whether it's Texas Tech just creating havoc and making guys uncomfortable in terms of what they want in the set. Mike Bray was very complimentary about Texas Tech defense, about they weren't able to run the stuff that they're normally running. And I think there's also a little bit of respect factor from Mike Gray is they played a lot of zone, because that's one thing that has troubled Texas Tech earlier in the season is playing zone. I mean, Baylor did that with Scott Drew trying to do that, and they were able to shoot out of it. Texas Tech was unable to shoot out of it yesterday. They were able to figure out a way, as you kind of mentioned before, but it just took a lot of effort in the last 2 minutes of that contest. But I think that's something to kind of look at when you're kind of talking about those things.
All right, so looking at the teams that they could potentially, of course, they're going to play Duke. How do you think they match up with them, and how do you think they match up with a potentially Gonzaga or, if the world gets what they want, Arkansas?
Well, I think when you look at Duke, there's going to be a lot of pressure on those players, and a team that didn't make the NCAA tournament last year, so there's an experience factor there. And maybe there's even an experience factor for Texas Tech in that, yes, they haven't been there as well, but there's a lot of guys who are going to play a lot of basketball games, and as Mike Bray called them, and some other coaches, even Bob Huggins, I believe, on some of the post-game shows, they're just a bunch of big dudes that are just manly men. I mean, they're just guys that have been through the ringer, so to speak, and they know how to play, and they know how to play physical. And I think that's something that a lot of teams, Duke for one, is going to have to get used to. Gonzaga's already seen it. I think both teams are going to be a little bit different just due to some of the injury and COVID protocols that didn't allow Tech to have a full roster earlier in the season. So I think that's going to be interesting. If they are able to get to play against Gonzaga, it would be another time Texas Tech did play against Gonzaga, and I'm sure that'll give Coach Mark Adams nightmares, because he remembers that was a game where he essentially felt Texas Tech had to outscore the Bulldogs in that last West Regional to advance, obviously, to the national title in that 2019 one. But they may have to do it again. But, I mean, you saw what happens when there are teams that play physical defense. We looked at it yesterday with TCU in Arizona. A lot of teams are not used to that style of play, but all the teams in the Big 12 are. And you kind of see how teams in the Big 12 have survived and advanced in the national tournament this year.
Carlos, be safe with travels. Good luck in the Sweet 16, the Big 12. 3 wins and 3 really close. TCU and obviously Texas battling, along with what Baylor did to come back from 25 down, losing overtime.
Yep.
Hell of a weekend for the Big 12. Could have been even better. And good luck going forward. Good luck with Duke. Thank you.
Hey, appreciate y'all.
Carlos Silva Jr., Lubbock Avalanche-Journal with us, Sicem 365 Radio. Before we break for the 5 o'clock hour, Craig's got a note.